Is Season 11 as good as the other hit seasons, or does it mark the start of some tragic downfall of Thomas that's utterly terrible? Today, let's find out with another ranking of each episode from Season 11, a season that is considered to be one of the better hit seasons. Like with Season 9, Season 11 starts out on a strong note after the previous season started out on a weak one. Thomas and the Storyteller is the three strikes formula done right. Instead of Thomas making 3 mistakes, he helps 3 engines, so we don't feel as bored by it. Thomas also feels like he's gone back to his Season 5 persona, and there's some nice callbacks to some classic episodes. The Thomas and Tugs fan has made a video explaining this episode much better than I can. His video will be linked in the description. Overall, this episode is really good and I place it in the great tier. Emily's Rubbish is another really good episode. Emily isn't too out of character here, and the scene with the big engines at the beginning is a nice callback. I also like how they use Emily to introduce with instead of Thomas, which is one of my big issues with most of the new characters in this era. I place this episode in the great tier. Dream On is an episode I've began to appreciate in recent years. The moral about being yourself is handled really well, and Thomas feels very much in character. So far, his character is a slight improvement from the previous season. I place this episode also in the good tier. Dirty Work is my favorite portrayal of James. James here feels like a more mature version of his character. He's still vain and boastful, but when his pride gets his friends into trouble, he feels bad and helps them. Would this James in Season 3 have done this? Absolutely not, he would have just left them to die. This episode is one of my favorites. Now, let's talk about Hector the Horrid. Hector the Horrid is my favorite episode of the entire hit era. Yes, I know, it's the Thomas Cynic's favorite episode too, but for good reason. Everything about this episode is amazing. The moral is amazing, Hector's arc is amazing, Thomas's development is amazing, the story is amazing, etc. This episode tops most of the classic era in my opinion. I love it that much. This episode goes into the top of the favorites tier. Nothing tops it. Gordon and the Engineer is an episode that uses real railway practice. Watch the Unlucky Tugs Hidden Gems video for more information. Donald and Douglas have also returned and play an important role in the story. This episode goes into the favorites tier. Notice how we haven't had a single bad episode yet. So far, Season 11 is doing very well. The episodes we've seen so far rival those of Season 10. Heck, Hector the Horrid actually tops all of them in my opinion, and I really wish that the rest of Season 11 was like this. But unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. Thomas and the Spaceship is fine, I guess. The nighttime visuals are really good, as well as the music, but the story is quite bland and the characters don't really feel like themselves. This episode goes in the okay tier. Henry's Lucky Day is much worse. The story is very gimmicky and Henry just doesn't feel like himself. The story is also quite boring. It's just Henry looking his trucks for 7 minutes.
7 minutes!
I placed this episode in the poor tier. Thomas and the Lighthouse is slightly better, but not much. The story is nothing new for Thomas. This episode is Thomas tries to go fast, and then he makes a mistake. Haven't we seen this plot millions of times before in the classic and hit eras? The ball being carried in a flatbed is also dumb, and the grammar in this episode is so bad. Seriously, they use Thomas speeded up. It should be sped up. Who wrote this? I'm convinced whoever didn't know what proper grammar is. Oh. What the actual This goes in the poor tier above Henry's Lucky Day. Thomas and the Big Bang is a bad episode. The episode's story is quite childish, and everyone is out of character. This is the first episode I've uploaded a rewritten version of, and while I wouldn't say my version is the best, it is miles better than this. This goes straight into the bad tier. Smoke and Mirrors is everything fans hate about the hit era meshed into one episode. It's gimmicky, the story is boring, and Thomas is a complete idiot who doesn't listen to the Fat Controller. I feel that some people look at this episode and then put the blame onto seasons 9 and 10, arguably more exciting seasons. It always pisses me off when the boring element only shows up in this season and yet people assume it's a problem with the whole era. Anyway, this episode goes into bad tier. Thomas Sets Sail is okay, I guess. It's quite gimmicky, and Thomas again is pretty dumb, but not as dumb as the previous 2 episodes. However, the scenes of Thomas getting pushed by the wind are pretty fun to watch, so I'll give it that. This goes in the okay tier. Don't Be Silly Billy is the most infamous episode this season, but honestly, I'd say it's the best one we've seen thus far, in terms of bad episodes, that is. Yes, Billy is unlikable and kind of annoying, but at least it actually gave me something. It gave me some character development from Thomas. Considering the fact that Henry's Lucky Day and Smoke and Mirrors are in this season, that's a big accomplishment. I place this in the top of the bad tier. Edward in the Mail is an episode I used to not really care for that much. That was until I saw a video by A Sodor Life. In that video, he states that this episode tried to give Edward a flaw to make him easier to write for, while at the same time not derail his character. And I kind of agree, and considering the fact that he's never pulled the mail before, how would he know how to do it? This episode does have some smaller issues, like why didn't the station master label the parcels, or tell the driver which parcels are in which car, but if we ignore them, you'll see way more positives than negatives. I'm actually gonna place this episode in the good tier. Hide and Peep is a boring episode. Thomas and Percy play hide and seek for 7 minutes. There, I explained the entire plot in not even 1 second. Both engines act extremely out of character and childish, but it was nice that they gave Cranky a major role, and I placed this episode in the poor tier. Toby's Triumph is, to me, worse than Don't Be Silly Billy. Behind the Great Little Railway Show, this is my second least favorite episode of Thomas ever produced. I made a tier specially for it because words cannot describe how much I hate this thing. Toby and Alicia Body are so ridiculously out of character, and the awful sets combined with the yellow tint doesn't help matters. Toby being out of character is bad enough, but having another character being off character at the same time as him, then I get angry. Do not watch this episode, it will scar you. Thomas and the Runaway Car is another boring episode. It tries to be fun, but fails miserably. Thomas and Gordon's dynamic is nice to see, and is handled much better than seeing the sides, but I never enjoyed this one, and it goes in the average tier. Thomas in Trouble is the other good episode in the middle half of Season 11. Thomas's character here is quite interesting. He puts his jobs first over his health, and is in denial about his condition until he can't go on. In most hit episodes, he abandons his job to go and have fun. This episode, on the other hand, shows that Thomas is so focused on his work, he doesn't pay attention to his health. Would Thomas in Season 1 have done this? Probably not. I personally have this go in the good tier. Okay, we're here at last. These next 2 episodes are not defendable. I hate both of them, and I also think it's interesting that they're right next to each other. One of them is really stupid, and the other is really boring. I want to get through these as quickly as possible, so here we go. Thomas and the Stinky Cheese is the first of these 2, and oh my god, this episode sucks. I've done a video explaining everything wrong with it, so I recommend you go and watch that. Everyone in this episode is stupid, and therefore the episode is stupid, and goes in the bottom of the bad tier. Percy on the left luggage is this, and oh my god, this episode is so boring. I can barely remember a single moment in this episode, aside from that one scene with Percy and Edward together. It just might be the most boring episode of the entire Thomas show. This episode goes above Thomas and the Stinky Cheese. Overall, Season 11 is not a good season. In fact, it's my least favorite of all the hit seasons, which is a shame as I think this season starts out really strong. The first 6 episodes this season are all really good, if not great, with Hector the Hornet being my favorite episode of the entire hits era. It also ends off on a decent note with the episodes on engines and escapades. But between all that is a bunch of meh to downright bad episodes, which are forgettable, boring, and stupid, with only 2 good episodes sprinkled in, and even they don't break the 8 out of 10 bar. My biggest problem with this season is undoubtedly the writing. All these episodes, with 3 exceptions, are almost exactly the same. Don't believe me? Well, let me go through the formula of this season, shall we? Every episode starts with a pointless intro of either how happy everyone is on Sodor, or an intro about the main character of the story. I guess Wash Behind Your Buffers is the only forgivable one, because Madge is introduced this season, so how would kids know her by now? Anyway, the Fat Controller arrives at this specific location and gives the engines a specific job, either on or off screen. Sometimes the engine has a specific goal they want to accomplish by the end of the episode.
Me? Snorted James. I can't help. It's much more important for me to look really smart when I arrive with my important passenger. I need my lucky trucks back, Henry huffed. I can't make my deliveries without them. Thomas wanted to be back in time to see the fireworks. Now he could find Percy's spaceship.
And other times there's something about the job they are afraid of and want to avoid it. They don't tell anyone about it so as to not look silly.
Edward wanted to ask how Percy would deliver the mail, but he didn't want to look silly. Skarloey was scared of the thunder and lightning, but he didn't want to tell his friends. He didn't want to look silly. Freddy didn't know, but he didn't want to ask James. He didn't want James to think he was even sillier.
Sometimes Sir Top Hat and Mr. Percival gives the engine a specific assignment they need to follow, but they don't listen because they are too busy thinking about the goal they want to accomplish. They then go out and begin their job. They then make a mistake because they are either too focused on their goal or too busy trying to avoid the thing they're scared of. They either don't notice their mistake, or they do notice and they just don't care. They then make another mistake. Again, they either don't notice or don't care. They then make the big bad third mistake, which in turn causes them to have an accident and mess up the job they are assigned. The engine is feeling remorseful and says something along the lines of, "Oh no, I didn't follow the specific instruction, and now the job I was assigned is ruined. Oh, what am I going to do?" They are given the opportunity to fix their mistake, either by figuring out themselves.
I must help my friends. Otherwise, they won't be here to see me be the star of the show. I have to get to the airport somehow, puffed Henry. Even without my lucky trucks. He knew where all the engines were waiting. If I hurry, I can put engines to work right away. I must collect the baggage now, or Sir Topham Hatt's mother will leave without it.
Or someone telling them how to fix it.
I deliver the parcels in a special order. I always start with the delivery that is furthest away. Then I work my way back to Tidmouth Sheds. Thomas, there is another cheese load ready at the dairy. But you'll have to puff quickly, said the foreman. The boat is waiting for you. You must clear up this mess at once, he cried. And your freight cars must be loaded by supper time.
They go and fix their mistake, and by the end of the episode, the day is saved and everyone is happy again. Sir Top Hat and Mr. Percival comes up and tells them well done and that they are a really useful engine. I kid you not, verbatim. Almost every episode uses the exact same formula. Maybe with a few alterations, but it's still the same formula. The only episodes in this season that don't use this formula are Hector the Horrid, Cool Truckings, and Gordon and the Engineer. Literally 3 out of 26 episodes in this season. It is that bad. This is the formula Hit will use for the next 5 seasons, and it only gets worse as time goes on. Another problem with this season are the sets. The sets this season are so bland that they have nothing in them besides trees. Every single set in this season looks the exact same. It also doesn't help that they often use the same sets over and over and over again. I also think I can speak for a lot of people when I say I am not a fan of the yellow tint they used in this season. It especially looks bad in episodes like Toby's Triumph, Thomas and the Stinky Cheese, and the entire Skarloey Railway. I swear, the visuals this season look even worse than Season 6's visuals. Compare a set from this season to a set from Season 5, and there's no contest. So overall, this season is not very good, and is honestly the start of Thomas's downfall. This season is the first to go in the average tier. Well, that's about it. The Season 12 ranking video is on the horizon, so see you then, and until next time, goodbye.